Hi, welcome to valuationpodcast.com, a podcast and video series about all things related to business and valuation. My name is Melissa Gragg, and I'm a valuation expert in St. Louis, Missouri. I have the privilege of interviewing Ben Allen of Allen Forensics today. He's a forensic investigator and certified fraud examiner in Dallas, Texas. And we will be discussing third-party fraud and tips on how to prevent identity fraud in this podcast. Welcome, Ben. How are you?
Hi, Melissa. I'm doing very fine. Thank you for having me on here.
Well, this is an awesome topic. You are the person we need to talk to about fraud, but maybe you can just get us started about what is fraud or third-party fraud and how is it carried out?
Beautiful. That's a good foundation to lay. So fraud is defined on the website of the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners as an intentional or as a deliberate act to deprive another of property or money by deception or other unfair means. It's also very important for us to know, in setting the foundational knowledge of what fraud is, that a man by the name Donald Cressy, who brought about what we now know as the fraud triangle, made a profound statement, and this was his finding. He said that the occurrence of fraud is conditioned by the joint existence of three dimensions, and the dimensions are pressure, rationalization, and opportunity. I'm going to link why this is important as we start this conversation. Pressure, this talks about the incentive, the motivation, probably, I'm broke, I'm in financial problems, and I need to find a way out of this. And at this point, I do not care if it's a legal way or an illegal way. So I'm under so much pressure. Now, the second leg of the triangle is what is called the rationalization. So at this point, I tell myself, hey, I'm justified. Everybody else does it. Moreover, I'm doing it for a just cause. People say the end justifies the means. So self-justification is the second leg of the fraud triangle. So now I have the motive. I've been able to then rationalize it. Now, all of this is happening within me. First, the motive is based on my circumstances. The rationalization is happening in my mind. Now, the third leg of the fraud triangle is opportunity. When the three are present, fraud is going to occur. What you and I can do is to ensure that we do not give the fraudsters the opportunity. We have no control over the pressure. We have no control over the rationalization, but we can try to a good extent to control the opportunity. And this is why companies have internal controls and checks and balances and audit department to ensure that there is no opportunity for anyone to perpetrate fraud. So having set this foundation, let's now talk about what is third-person fraud. Now, if there is third-person fraud, someone may think, is there first-person fraud? Is there second-person fraud? Well, the answer is yes. So first-person fraud is when you, by yourself, use your own personal information to perpetrate fraud. An example of that may be for me to travel by road. I live in Dallas, Texas. So I can travel by road to Oklahoma City. It's a 3-hour drive. So I go there by road. I won't fly, just in an attempt to ensure there's no trail, right? So I go to Oklahoma City by road and I go have some fun. And at the end of the weekend, I drive back to Dallas and then I call my credit card company and I tell them, hey, I think somebody used my card. And then they begin to investigate. Now, people are smart to also keep the threshold to be below $5,000 because they are aware that any financial crime below that threshold, the bank is not going to waste their time to do much investigation, right? So the guy can, for the weekend, spend like $3,500, or $4,500. That's a lot of money to spend over the weekend. Now, immediately, right, the Consumer Protection Act empowers or mandates the credit card companies to block that card and to put the money back while they investigate. Now that is first person fraud. And we've had people do this and get away with it. Now, second person fraud is when I give my information to my spouse, to my friend, to my brother, and say, hey, buddy, you know what? Use my information and let's take care of this. So that is second person fraud. That's happening with my consent. Now, third person fraud is what I consider the most dangerous because it's happening without my consent. I don't even know where it's happening. I'm not aware of the agency that these guys are using my information to defraud. I'm not aware of the geography where this is taking place. Because if I was doing fraud by myself, right, I would have had some strategic calculations. Okay, you know what? I'm going to keep the threshold below $5,000. I'm not going to, do something to attract the feds. But when someone else is using my identity, there are no boundaries, right? And this is happening to my identity without my information, without my knowledge, and that is really scary. So that's what third person fraud is all about, is when an individual or a group of people use another's identity or personal details to perpetrate fraud, of course, without my consent.
Which is what everybody usually knows as kind of identity fraud. But I think that in general, they don't know the depth of how that could affect them. They kind of know, oh, somebody could steal my credit card, somebody could steal my social security, so I shred everything. We do things to try to prevent it. But, how deep does this go? Like, why should I even care about third person fraud or identity theft if I'm doing all the things I need to try to prevent it?
Okay, awesome. So let's first talk about how this fraud is being carried out. Yeah. So there are several data broker websites all over the place, right? You have advancedbackgroundchecks.com, you have White Pages, you have Truth Finder. Now, all of these websites contain basic personal identifying information about you and I. And so when these fraudsters go on there, they get those basic information, and then they go to the dark web to use that to harvest other corresponding data about me. They can also get the information by driving to a nice neighborhood. When they drive to a nice neighborhood, like an apartment complex or where you have houses, and the assumption is, in most cases, that's the reality, that folks who live in these kinds of neighborhoods are well-to-do. They have money, they have good credit. So, and they may not take note of little money here and there being taken out of them. So that's the kind of geography that these guys go after. Now, they get those basic identifying information, then they go to the dark web. There's a site on the dark web called SSNDOB. You'll be amazed that on that site, on the dark web, you can actually get anybody's social security number, and that is so scary. So if you are able to get a name, Ben Allen, for example, and you were able to get other supporting corresponding information like my address. So now there's no false positives, right? You have Ben Allen, you have Dallas, Texas. Let's say you know my zip code. Now you keep narrowing your search. Eventually you'll be able to harvest all of my real basic information. Now what you do is you can go to a site also on the dark web and buy a driver's license. Now, the only thing you cannot do with the driver's license, remember, the driver's license has my real name, it has my home address, it has my DL number, which they have found and bought on the dark web for like $10 or $20. So it has all of my information. Now, also when it comes to the picture of my face, if those guys are some tech guys, they would have known my demographics. And so they can just say, you know what, get a black male or get a white female, from the dark web, or they can even decide to go on Facebook or LinkedIn and get my real picture and put it on the driver's license. Now, the only limitation this driver's license will have is the inability to board a plane. Because when you get to the airport, the TSA folks will be able to detect that it's fake. But if you are a guy that works as a picker, right, for a ring of guys that move money, use people's credit cards to buy things all over the place, they usually need a picker. Now they can say, hey, Ben, once a week for the next 4 months, you are going to be going to any Walmart or Kroger to pick 2,500. When I go there, I'm not going to use my real ID. I'll have to present such fake IDs. So sometimes the identity theft scheme is not so much as to get money from us, but it's to use our identity in the place of theirs. If in a year or two, the feds come up on that operation, and then the feds begin to subpoena Walmart and all of these places, they are going to have my ID. And so they're going to come after me. I'm like, well, I mean, you're invited for interrogation. For the past 1 year, you've been going to Walmart to pick money. We have your ID. What? And then even though you may come out of it eventually, well, you should come out of it eventually, but think about the mental stress. Think about the shock. Think about how that messes you up. That really does mess you up a big time. So these guys can use that same driver's license to open bank accounts. And what they're doing at this time is they go to the banks with a hat and a mask. So they always look like robbers, right? But they dress into the banks and they open accounts in the names of people. I had a PI call, a private investigator called me from Florida to collaborate on a case he was working on. And he said to me that this client of his has a company, and some guys updated the company's formation records with the Secretary of State without the guy's consent, and threw the guy off the company without him knowing. And then now they got updated company information, and they used the company's information to go get a loan. And then it's just crazy what people do and how far people go. And that's the essence we're talking about this, because we're going to be sharing tips that will help people to, at least to a comfortable extent, protect their privacy.
Well, and I think that, people don't understand how easy it is to get information. I think, it used to, sometimes every week you could get an email from a big company that says, sorry, we had a data breach. Your information could have been removed or in the wrong hands. You should change your password or things like that. But the reality, and I don't think that they really know how prevalent this is. And in some cases, I think when, I've done a lot of forensic work, you've done we become a little desensitized to it. Absolutely. Like, I just assume that everybody can steal my information at all times. But let's talk about why this type of fraud is so easy to undertake, because I don't think people really understand that. Now, I've talked to FBI agents. Okay. I've talked to people that, it is so easy. But it's maybe because we just don't know, or we're not paying attention. I don't know.
That's a very great question, Melissa. One of the things that has made this so easy is technology. So the same way technology has made our lives so easy, it has also made the schemes of the fraudsters easy. So easy. Think about machine learning. Think about automation. Think about artificial intelligence. All of these things makes things so easy. We have people that apply for stuff. Okay, so a good example, right? We're doing, an investigation of a group of guys who, in this COVID period, were getting unemployment from different states. And they put in the application. They go use, so for example, Ben I didn't lose my job, I'm working, but some guys getting money on my behalf. Prior to this pandemic, when you apply for unemployment, they will call the company and call you, but this time around, because of the number of applications that came in, they were just calling people randomly. Sometimes the system just automates the approval process. So such technology that had to be in place just to aid approval because of this pandemic made it easy as well for folks to just use people's information to apply for unemployment. And then when it comes to where the money should be sent to, they put their real account, or they put an account they have control over. And this system wasn't set up to detect that, and folks are just getting money. And that is really crazy. So technology has made it so easy. There's a fraud scheme, and we made some effort to inform the feds about this. There's a scheme we discovered happening in Houston. These guys are buying cars, Range Rovers and G-Wagons. You know what they're doing? They keep the threshold of their fraud below $100,000, right? So the FBI doesn't look at them. What they do is this. They get a profile of, for example, Ben Allen. So they drive to a nice neighborhood in Houston and they see a house, they write the house address, then they're able to get the owner of the house. These guys will clone an ID in my name. Then they will use gift cards to open an LLC in my name. So my name will be there as the owner of the LLC, and I'm not aware. I had a Zoom meeting with a set of executives I do trainings for, and I told them that we need to conduct a search on the Secretary of State's website to see if someone has registered a company in your name in this season. So a company is registered, and remember, talking about technology, these systems are automated. There's no physical interface. Nobody calls you for anything. You just buy the gift card, you go to the Secretary of State's website, you put the name of the company, XYZ LLC, it goes through. In 3 days, they send you an email to an email address you would have provided to download the formation documents. Now you have real company documents in the name of a real person who is alive, but is unaware that some guys are impersonating him. So what they do with that is this. They then make an ID in the name of this same person, and then they go to the bank within this pandemic period and go open a business account. Now they apply for the payroll protection program, and then they falsify documents, and then they make sure that they do the calculations so that what they will be approved for will be less than $100,000. Now, this is what these guys are doing. So the folk who goes to the bank to open the account, that guy is giving 30%. When the money is paid, everybody shares their money, they go their separate ways, and the following day or the following week, they strike again. And this is so easy now, also because of technology. So that is one. Number two will be the availability of data. It has made this so easy. I had a great friend of mine that served in the Marines. Somebody bought a house in her name. This is true story. She gave us a video testimonial when we were able to help her get sorted. Like somebody bought a house, and this was not 10 years ago. This was like a few years ago. So you ask yourself some questions. How is somebody able to not buy a cell phone, buy a house in somebody else's name? And then they began to call her for payment. She's like, what payments? What are you guys talking about? So data is available on Google, on the data broker websites. One of the recommendations is to get yourself off the data broker websites as much as you can. Get yourself off of those sites, because that's where it all starts from. So technology and the availability of data on the internet has made it easy for these guys to perpetrate fraud. When we also talk about technology, let's also remember the advent of tools like VPN. You know how the VPN works, whereby I can be in Dallas, Texas, but I can change my IP to be Atlanta, Georgia, just to change the trail. So all of this has made fraud so easy. We have folks who are not even within the boundaries of the United States, but they're perpetrating fraud from outside the country, but they're able to access some of the platforms because by the use of the VPN, they just click on the server within the States. And with that, now they have access. So technology has really advanced the scheme of the fraudsters.
So, and I think it's very interesting because, I do my own research on companies when we go to value them, and I can pull up the owners off the Secretary of State, then it has an address, and then I can go to the real estate part of the state, and look up addresses, their personal addresses, and get additional information. So if it's easy for me, then it's certainly going to be easy for somebody who wants to do something fraudulent. Absolutely. But I don't know, like when I looked at fraud and when you look at fraud, are there certain types of people that are doing this? Are they, because I know they're looking for the opportunity, but what can we really do to stop this type of stuff?
That's a very good question. It's also a tough one to answer. First of all, I would say, let's just take it that anybody can perpetrate fraud. Anybody. I went to Firestone to get my car's, my oil change, and I was in front of the guy. He was like, "What's your phone number?" I said, "Can I get a pen and paper? Let me write it down." Why? Because there were a lot of people seated at the waiting area, and I can't just call my phone number. I don't know who is behind me, who's going to be so smart to quickly take it down. And if you go on advancedbackgroundchecks.com, it's free. You put in that phone number, it's going to populate. Of course, I'm not there. I've taken myself out of all the sites. But on a normal day, the regular person's information would have been exposed in that way. So I said, "Can I please have a pen and paper? Let me write my number. I'm not going to call it out." And that's what I did. I'm sure the guy was wondering why. But because I've decided to just say, you know what? Anybody can be a perpetrator of this fraud. Yes, there may be certain demographics of those who are really doing this, but it's not just limited to the confines of the US. We have folks who are in neighboring countries, but you see, it is a network. It's a ring, because they need somebody here in whose accounts the monies will be sent to. They need somebody here who will pick whatever they are able to purchase with the credit cards that they steal. So I just assume it's anybody and everybody. And that kind of helps me to live a life of caution perpetually.
Well, and the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, or ACFE, does like a fraud report every year. And it's always a high percentage. And of course, I don't know the percentage right now, but probably like 70, 80+% of people who perpetrate fraud get caught, and it's their first time getting caught. So these aren't criminals that have, always been out there. Sometimes it's just like you said, if we go back to that fraud triangle, a part of it is you have the opportunity. So, there's money laying on the ground. You have the opportunity to pick it up and keep it for yourself. But now you look around and see, okay, is anybody watching me? Is it, can I get away with it? Can I rationalize, like, maybe God is giving me the money. I'm broke. I needed $50 and look, it appeared. So you rationalize, you say, well, I need it more than that person. And then what's the third one? So that we have the opportunity, the rationalization, and then
pressure.
The what?
The pressure, the motive.
Yeah, the motive. Yeah. And so then you have the motive. And it's fascinating to me because realistically, all of us, especially in a pandemic or especially in a downturn in the economy, could be right on the edge of being able to rationalize all of this. Like, I need to pay my bills. I need to do something, you have too much money. I work for somebody who has too much money. Like, they won't notice if I take a little, those types of things. I don't think people understand. People think that fraud is perpetrated by criminals. And the reality is that is true to some extent, but there's also people that become into that kind of criminal nature just by not being able to provide for their family or something like that. And that's where it gets a little bit difficult. But if we're talking about this third party fraud, what types of people or what types of information, because they really don't care about you as a person, they're really trying to get easy information, but do they target certain populations, or do they look for certain types of types of information, I guess, to steal?
Yes. Again, they try to go to good neighborhoods. They try to target certain, based on my investigations and findings in the past 12 months, I realized that sometimes they want to target the Indians, because they know that most of them that are in the Dallas area, they all have great jobs working in the IT companies. So they know that they have good credit, they are well paid. So I've seen that they target these kinds of people. Again, going to good neighborhoods, finding folks that have good credit, folks who won't care, if $10,000 or 20 is taken out of them. They kind of target those kinds of people. Also, folks who work in big companies, like there are some big companies that for their employees, the background check includes a credit check, just to be sure that you have a good financial, integrity. Which is also an attempt to be sure you're not going to be a risk as an employee. Some big companies do that. So these guys are aware of this, and then they target folks that work in these kinds of companies. Because that, again, as you know, the fact that you work in that company has taken away the due diligence for them. They know you're already cleared, you're a good target, so they just get to you, and they can get to you from anywhere. Melissa, do you know there are people on LinkedIn that create fake profiles? Mm-hmm. And these guys can have over 2,000 connections. Mm-hmm. It's so easy these days. How do you verify? Anybody can say they are anything. Anybody can go on there and put a name, put a location, put a picture, say they have an MBA, they have a PhD, they went to Harvard. Who verifies all these things? Nobody does. And so anybody can create any kind of profile on LinkedIn. You get your invites and, oh, okay, went to Harvard. Oh, okay, has a PhD. Oh, lives in Washington, D.C. And then you accept. And then now these guys have access to you, begin to communicate, and unknown to you, talking to a ghost. We've had people who have, I've had a case where they met on LinkedIn and someone actually, monies were being exchanged, not knowing that this was a fraudulent person.
Well, and I think on social media, you do see a lot of profiles that are fraudulent, and I'll see a picture and I'm like, wait, that's an old picture. Wait, am I already connected to this person? But I think the normal person isn't going to go through that whole thought process. Yeah. They're just like, oh, I recognize the name. Oh, I recognize the picture. And I click, okay. And with social media, I think that is one way where people can get a tremendous amount of information from you, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know, right? And people have to be careful, the way we post stuff. I know it's fine. We all want to live free and be happy and express ourselves. There's a lady, true story, during this pandemic. I think she just felt like, maybe she was idle, felt like doing something. And then she did a video recording of a property just to show folks. So this is my bedroom. This is my living area. This is my dining area, just having fun. And, it was surprising that somebody broke into a house. Yeah, somebody did break into a house. And when the investigation was going, on, it was like, this probably would have been a trigger. You just went and you were showing folks your apartment. Somebody knows, or your house. So somebody knows where you live, right? And then you send them a picture. I'm in Chicago. I'm in Florida. For me, there's really if you can, do not put all of those, because with that people can profile you and they can tell, oh, okay, this person is currently in so and so location. Now I know they're not home. Let me try and go see what I can get from their house. It's just important on social media to try and limit the amount of personal identifying information that we put out there. Because I've heard people say, I run a business, I want to be reachable and accessible, and I get it. We all want to, but not for your personal identifying information. That's what we're saying. And your public email that folks use to get in touch with you, do not choose that same email for your bank. Do not choose that same email for Cash App or any of these other transactions that you carry out. Let the emails for that be different. That's also a counsel that I give my clients. Yes.
That's a good point. And I think that in general, let's just, if you go a little bit deeper in that and say, okay, the woman who showed all of the pictures of her different rooms, the person probably saw that there was no security cameras. They saw how the door was locked. They saw the things that she had that could have been valuable. And then I think we have this tendency to be like, hey, I'm on vacation. And so what do you know? They know that you're gone now. And they could just be, it's not that they pick you out to watch you. They could be watching a ton of people. Absolutely. And waiting for the opportunity.
Yep. Right.
And it doesn't really have to do with anything, but that comes back to kind of another issue, which is financial institutions and law enforcement have to get involved in some capacity. What role do you see them playing in these third-party types of fraud?
Yeah, so I've worked in a few top financial institutions here in the US. I can say that the financial institutions are doing a lot of great work, and it's good the regulators are on them, right, to ensure that everybody is in compliance. And whenever there's a compliance lapse, the banks are fined. So that's a good thing going on there. But there needs to be more investigation in an area of a typology that I call activity burst. So for the past 7 months, there's been no meaningful transaction activity in your account. And from nowhere in this pandemic between April and August, there's been like every month there's like 40 grand or 60 grand or 70 grand. That's not business as usual. Something does not commensurate here. And the banks need to look into such transactions and investigate it. That's one of the ways. And I know the banks, it takes resources, right, of human capital to get all of these investigations done. I'm also aware there are a few softwares here and there that can just pick whenever there are these unusual activities. So I think I'd like to encourage the financial institutions to do more. Also, I know it's expensive to do investigations, but you see, the fraudsters are now aware that any financial fraud or crime below $5,000, the bank cannot go to investigate it. So they keep that threshold. So for the 500 here this week, for the 500 here that week, in a month, if a guy is able to do that around 5 people, you see, he has over 20 grand, right? And then I spoke to a guy that was with law enforcement. He was telling me, he said there were times that actually arrested people for fraud, right? He said, but the bank tells them that they are not interested in pressing charges and that they just let them go. And it's frustrating to the police because they want to preserve and keep law and order. But if the bank whose money was stolen is not interested in pressing charges, the police can't do anything. So I don't know how they're gonna, work together. I know it takes a lot of money again to investigate, to prosecute, but my take is, how it's been said that if you're faithful in little, you'll be given even much more responsibility or much more things to handle. If I perpetrate fraud to the tune of $1,000 and I go scot-free, I'm telling you, Melissa, I'm going to be encouraged and inspired to increase my threshold. Yeah. And so the guys who wake up and commit frauds of $100,000 didn't just wake up and do that on that day. They started from somewhere. Most of them started from 2 grand, 3 grand, but they were going scot-free. And by every successful act of financial crime, they are inspired and they get more creative to even do more, to even do more. So this is where I feel the financial institutions and the enforcement can come in. There has to be a way that this little amounts involved in this kind of financial crimes should not be treated as not important, because that's usually where it starts.
Well, and I think that that's an important thing to understand is that, realistically, banks have, not all banks, but a lot of the banks have sort of these funds that's what they use. So and right now, let's go through the pandemic right now. So in the pandemic, everybody was ordering from Amazon or from the grocery store, Instacart, things like that. But then it became that you couldn't get everything from there. So now you're ordering from all these other sites and you're ordering by credit card and you're putting all of your data into new site. Okay, now I got to order directly from the shoe person, directly from, the toilet paper company, like whatever. And so you're ordering from all these different places, entering your personal information again and again and again. And what I think people don't understand is it's not necessarily that the banks don't want to investigate this. Of course, they don't want to lose money. But if somebody runs $500 at Walmart on your card, like let's say they get your actual card and you know about it, which is not necessarily what you're talking about, but it's a good way to explain things to people. So they go to Walmart and they buy $500 worth of stuff. They get the stuff, right? And the $500 goes on your bank account. Well, it's in the pandemic. And I'm like, I didn't get $500 at Walmart. I know I didn't. So I call my bank and say, oh, I think somebody got a hold of my card, stop my card. What happens? The $500 comes right back into my account. So, and the interesting part is that the banks in some ways don't even care. Like that's the point of them doing business and being so easily that you can deposit a check and take a picture of a check and the money's there immediately. they know that there's going to be some times where the money isn't always there or there's some fraud, but in their mind, unless it gets to a certain threshold, it is the cost benefit isn't there.
Yes.
And so they're just like, oh, $500. Okay, we'll give it back to the person. Now the person is like, oh my gosh, that $500 was huge. And everybody I know, I was like, who cares? Call your bank. They'll give it right back to you. They could liquidate your entire account and they will give it back to you. And then it's in their hands to try to, do something different, which people don't always understand that concept. And then if they don't prosecute, do you care, as the person, that somebody took your credit card and went and bought $500 because you have the money back? No, you don't. But now all of your information could be potentially out there because you haven't stopped that outflow of your confidential information to going out to those other perpetrators. But I agree with criminals. If I can take $1,000 from you and I have to find 5 other people to do the 5,000, I'd rather take 4,999 from you and then find 5 other people to take that same amount. So they do, and they get greedier and greedier because they just don't want to work as hard, and it's easy and it's happening. But that kind of presents another possibility. And we've talked about some of these things, but are there more ways that I can protect myself from being a victim of this third person fraud? And what is some advice of how to get rid of some of my personal information? Because that's hard. That's not so easy. I'm kind of everywhere. So I don't think I'm going to be able to erase it. But for normal people, what can they do to protect themselves?
All right. Great question, Melissa. Great question. Let's start with your mails.
Okay.
Mails. So I tell folks, get a shredder.
Okay.
Yeah, get a shredder. When you go to the mailbox and you have mails that are just like junk mails, do not just dump them in the trash, because it contains your name and address is a powerful tool in the hands of a fraudster. Because with that, they are able to harvest other corresponding information. So I take all my mails home and I shred what I do not need. That's how I treat my mails. Also, I'm careful what I put in my trash. You see, when people want to go after you, they can go to any length to destroy your reputation. I realized that in my trash can contain valuable intelligence for the fraudsters, so they can profile you based on the things in your trash. Mm-hmm. So I'm careful about the things that I dump in my trash, and by things I mean paper trails, right? So that's something we should be careful about. When you move out of an apartment, go on the USPS website and update your new address for your mails, because if you live in an apartment, I'm sure you can relate with this. There'll be times you go to your mailbox and you find mails coming to your apartment number, but in the name of the prior resident of that apartment complex or unit. Mm-hmm. So what happens is now that's a free information to the current residents of that apartment. Ben Allen lived here prior to now, that's why I'm getting these mails. Okay, now I know Ben Allen is tied to this address. Now I can perpetrate fraud with this information. So go to USPS website, update your information, let no mails be going to your whole apartment. That is very, very important. Now let's talk about, that's for mails. Let's talk about your digital footprints. And we spoke about this briefly. There's a website, we spoke about this earlier. There's a website called, a company called OneRep. When you go on OneRep.com for a little amount of money, they are able to help you to remove your information from all of these data broker websites at the same time. So instead of you having to go to every one of them, White Pages, Truthfinder, there are a bunch of them. Just go to OneRep.com, and then just do an assessment, a scan. You will be amazed. It's going to populate everywhere that you are exposed.
I'm a little concerned to even check on it. But yeah, this is a good tip. Okay, keep on going. Sorry.
Right? Sometimes it could bring some false positives, but the way it works is what's your name, what's your city, and then I'm not sure if it has your age, and then it just populates. Then you can just pay a little amount of money, you upload your ID, so they're sure it's you, right? And when you upload your ID, remember to block your DL number. Yeah, your DL number, take that out. I think you can also take out your house address. You just want to be sure it's not a robot, but a human being. Upload that, pay the amount of money, and boom. In a couple of weeks, you're going to see that all of those pages are actually going to be taken down. That's a great resource. So I tell folks to go on there, because that's the tool that we also use, and get rid of your digital footprints in that form. I mean, you can be on other platforms for business. I mean, the Facebook is great, Instagram, LinkedIn, awesome. But we're talking about personal identifying information. Also, there's a place you can also go to right now. And this I've seen this scare people. I tell them, just right now on your laptop, go to advancedbackgroundchecks.com. Put in your phone number, put in your name and your city. You'll be amazed. Your known addresses, your possible relatives. It will look as though you're conducting a search as an investigator on government databases. It's going to bring a lot of things out, which is not good. Also, for phone numbers, I tell folks, get a secondary line. Use Google Voice. On dating sites, you meet strangers, use a secondary number, because your phone number is a giveaway. If I get anybody's phone number and put it again on advancedbackgroundchecks.com, it's going to populate. Now I know where you live and all of that. So get secondary numbers. If you use an iPhone, there's an app called Text Now. You download Text Now. It has the ability to let you choose secondary numbers from different states. Yeah, it's crazy. So you can get a number for Florida, a number for New York. It's crazy, but it's on there though. And so you can use this. And then the app, you get your messages, you get your calls. What people do is they set, so when you miss a call, the voicemail may let the caller know this is a secondary number. So what folks do is to set a voicemail to that. Right. Or
and what was that one again?
Is a Text Now. One word, text, T-E-X.
Okay.
Yeah, text now.
Textnow.com. Okay.
Yeah. I'm not sure if there's a .com there, but if you just put Text Now on your iPhone Apple Store, it's going to bring it up.
Gotcha.
Yeah, awesome tool to get a secondary number. Also, I recommend credential monitoring on the dark web. Earlier, you spoke about changing of passwords. Now, everybody knows that we should have a password policy in our companies. Now, which most times the rule of thumb is change every 30 days or change every 90 days. Now, let's consider the policy that states we should change every 30 days. The problem with that is, what if I changed my password on the 5th of the month, but then the breach occurred on the 7th? How am I going to know? And to me, by changing my password every 5th of the month, I'm in compliance. Yes, you're in compliance, but that's not been smart. So I recommend credential monitoring. It has to be continuous. And there's a company called Spy Cloud. Spy Cloud offer the service. We have ID agents. They offer that service whereby you are able to be notified promptly as soon as there's a breach, as soon as your email and password is identified or seen on the dark web. So these are some of the ways that folks can protect themselves.
Well, and I think that, we've seen over the past, 3 to 5 years, tax fraud really increase. And the reality is, if people can get you enough information about you that they're going to file fraudulent tax returns, then they can find anything. And so you really do have to be kind of vigilant in your own capacity of looking. A lot of people don't look at their credit card statements. They don't look at their bank statements. Somebody could be running $49 a month and you catch it 6 months later because you're not even paying attention. A lot of times the banks will have time frames. Like if you want to refute, if somebody's charged you improperly, you need to tell them within a 3-month period. Yes. Well, now you're not looking at things. So now it's 6 months down the line. You're like, wait, I want a refund for all this. And they say, they could say at that point, maybe they wouldn't give you a refund. So, you really have to kind of be a little bit more vigilant about your own situation. But if it, let's say that somebody has taken some of your information. Let's say that they have fraudulently done something under
Yeah.
your name and you find out. Is there a way to prevent it from happening again? Because you only have one social security number, I think. I don't think you can change that. Maybe you can. But, how do you go about preventing it in the past and from happening again?
Yeah, so sincerely, again, I would like to recommend continuous monitoring.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were able to use any of these services, or you come to us and we help you to delete all of this information, right? Now, it doesn't end there. Why? Because 3 months down the line, you may go to the bank to open another account. And a few weeks after that, the bank will sell your information to this data broker websites. What that means is the information we took out will again be populated. So continuous monitoring can't be overemphasized. There are certain sites in the past where we have posted a few personal information about ourselves, which we've not been able to take out. What I tell people to do in that case is to just go on there and edit the information.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so that's a smart thing to do. So it's there, I can take it out, right? Cool. I'm gonna just alter it. So if I'm based in Dallas, Texas, I'm not gonna just put Alaska, yeah, or Wyoming or New York, and just put a fictitious address or something there just to take that away. And
Gotcha.
some people, when they're also not sure of a particular platform, they use a different date of birth, maybe a different year, just to move things around, so it doesn't just come together towards you. That's what I would recommend. Yeah, and again, for the sake of this conversation, what I would also recommend is that anybody that has kind of situation should talk to us. We are able to take care of them.
Well, and there are some websites that I think have offered in the past. I don't know if I've seen them recently, but they'll say for a monthly fee, we'll protect your information. Is that really possible? Or, I think, is that false hope of saying, well, they're watching it, I don't have to worry about it? Do you really just have to be vigilant no matter what?
Good question. You have to be vigilant no matter what, number one. Number two, I don't want to call names, but most of these companies that say they defend us, our reputation, and all of that, what you realize is that what they do sometimes are automated.
Mm-hmm.
But what you need, I've seen someone that subscribed to a very popular advertised service of this company, but then he had to still come back to us. You need a team of licensed investigators who have access to data, who are licensed to investigate, who are licensed to operate certain government databases, who are trained, who are certified fraud examiners, for example. I mean, people who are experienced. And then for us, having worked at the banks doing financial crimes, has been great because we've seen a lot, and we can see trends, we can see patterns, we can tell where this is going. So I recommend that people need the same way you need a doctor, you need a personal physician. If you care so much about your identity, I think it's good to have a one-on-one touch feel with whoever is helping you to sort things out, because most of those offerings by these companies are automated and they cannot do a great job.
Well, and I think that it becomes important if you own multiple businesses, if you own multiple properties, if you own things that really, tarnishing your record and things like that is important. Reaching out to somebody individually to watch it is important. But you mentioned being a certified fraud examiner, so why don't you talk to people a little bit about what is a certified fraud examiner, and do they need one to hire one for these types of situations?
Absolutely. To become a certified fraud examiner, you have to, you would have gone through a certain level of training. You've written exams. You understand the law part of things. You understand investigation. You understand different schemes. And this very admirable, noble body, which is called the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, certifies you. You have people who are credentialed. You have them sign. I think you have 3 of them sign for you to vouch for you. So it's a very serious process. It's not just a process that you just go do. I mean, it's a very serious process, and these guys are keen on compliance. I remember one time, I think there was something we hadn't done as regards to to our membership with the organization, and we were instantly called out in the private email. So that tells you how they're keen on. There has to be compliance. Yeah, that's be compliance. So for you to be part of this very noble body that stands to to fight against fraud, it's a big deal, and such people are the right guys to help with this kind of problems. We have access to lots of materials. Like you mentioned, the report to the nations, which is issued by this organization every year. Lots of materials, lots of information that helps. We are trained in fraud detection, fraud prevention, fraud mitigation. It's just a bunch of, you see, what the CFE process makes you to become is great. It's a great resource that needs to be deployed to help people's lives feel safer and better.
And I think that it's important to understand that certified fraud examiners are trained in a lot of different realms. So just because you have two people that have the same credentials, it does not mean that they have the same experience, because fraud is perpetrated in so many different ways on so many different levels that I think sometimes it's really hard to be the fraud expert in all capacities. But tell us more about your firm and the services that you really provide, because usually they're unique to each type of person who is in forensics.
Absolutely, you're right. So there has to be a specialization. So we specialize primarily in financial forensics, which some also call forensic accounting. And that simply is about it's simply the act and science of investigating people and money. So that's one of our specialties. And what we also do, we do cyber risk advisory, because we realize that most of the fraud that is being perpetrated now has something to do with computers. It's been enabled by the cyber world. So we realize there is no way to fully investigate or help in preventing fraud without bringing in the cyber element of things. Yeah, so financial forensics, and of course we have the cyber risk advisory, and we have a few companies that we set up their prompt notification to monitor their emails once there's a breach. A bunch of services, available on our site that shows people tells people what we do. Basically, it is financial forensics and cyber risk advisory.
That's great. Well, I've really appreciated it. I don't think I knew as much, and it might make me a little bit more scared, but I'm going to check out those websites for sure, because I think that that's the first step, is you just have to be aware if there's things going on. You can't just hide under a rock and say, oh, it won't happen to me or something like that, because it really is too prevalent. Like, if you haven't been affected by some type of fraud, you're probably lucky, because most people have, especially with the tax fraud or even the bank fraud that you might see. But we'll probably have you on to talk about some of the computer forensics, because I think that's a fascinating area as well. But we appreciate it. Ben Allen with Allen Forensics in Dallas, Texas. And thanks for joining valuationpodcast.com.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you so much.
I'll talk to you soon.
All right, then. Bye.